It was an otherwise ordinary day in 1955. PanAm Flight 914 was preparing to take off from JFK Airport on what was supposed to be a routine flight from New York to Miami. But something strange happened along the way, something people are still talking about over half a century later. Let's talk about PanAm Flight 914, July 2nd, 1955. People all across the United States are preparing to celebrate Independence Day. No doubt this was an especially exciting day for the people who were about to board an airplane, since this kind of travel was still new. Very early in the morning, Flight 915 took off with 57 passengers and 4 crew members. They were scheduled to land in Miami, Florida just before 10 a.m., but that never happened. At some point during the flight, all communication was lost. Flight 914 crew members stopped responding to messages altogether. Air traffic controllers tried desperately to get a hold of them, but to no avail. The plane had disappeared from the radar, almost as if it had vanished into thin air. A search was conducted, but nothing was ever found. No bodies, no wreckage. The plane and everyone on it had been lost. It was a complete enigma to everyone who knew about it. Until one day in 1992, when all of that changed. On the morning of May 21st, air traffic controller Juan de la Corte saw something unusual at his post at an airport in Caracas, Venezuela. The propeller of an airplane not scheduled to land that day became visible in the distance. Suddenly, he got a radio message from a man who sounded distraught. When he asked the man to identify himself, he responded by saying, "Where are we? What's going on?" The man sounded frantic, but he did eventually identify himself as the pilot of Flight 914. Somehow, on the way to Miami, they had ended up 1,200 miles off course. A stunned silence fell over the air traffic control tower. Juan de la Corte told them they were in Venezuela, not Miami, but did clear them for landing. As the plane touched down on the runway, another message from the pilot came through. "Something's wrong. This isn't right." De la Corte responded by telling him he was at Caracas International Airport, and the date was May 21st, 1992. The pilot was still clearly distraught as the ground crew approached the plane. They would later report the faces of passengers being pressed up against the windows. All of them wore clothing that had been fashionable in the 1950s. When the ground crew reached the pilot, he opened the cockpit window and tried to wave them away. He started to taxi off the runway, but not before dropping something on the pavement. When the ground crew approached the mysterious object he had dropped, they were stunned. It was a calendar from 1955. A brief investigation was conducted into the incident, but nothing substantial was ever found. Some sources said the plane was never seen again. Others claim it eventually landed, and the passengers disembarked and went on with their normal lives, but never aged again. Over the years, the story spread. Rumors started of a cover-up by the US and Venezuelan governments, both of whom refused to discuss the incident. And with so little evidence to go on, people started to speculate. Some people wondered if Flight 914 had traveled through a wormhole. Wormholes are structures in space that act like a sort of tunnel, connecting two separate points in time. Their existence has never been proven, but Albert Einstein famously theorized about them quite a bit. He didn't think they were traversable, but was he wrong? Could Flight 914 have somehow crossed one of these wormholes and come out the other side? Other people point to the flight's route, which took it very close to the Bermuda Triangle. This is the area of the triangle, and this is the route a plane might have taken from Miami to Caracas. But remember, Flight 914 was never meant to go to Caracas, meaning it wouldn't have necessarily followed this route. Did the pilot somehow get lost and find his way into the Bermuda Triangle? Then again, the Bermuda Triangle is known for its mysterious disappearances, but not its reappearances. So this might not explain what happened to Flight 914 after all. So what did happen here? How did a plane stay missing for 37 years, only to land as if nothing had ever happened? Well, the short answer is that it didn't. The entire thing is completely made up. The earliest documentation I could find of this story was an article in the Weekly World News in May of 1985. In this edition, the flight had only been missing for 30 years before its mysterious reappearance. A similar article was published in May of 1993 and said the plane had landed the year prior, so 37 years. This is the version that seems to be most talked about. Yet another version of the story appeared in the paper in 1999. All the articles basically told the same story, but with different wording and details. The last two stories both mentioned air traffic controller Juan de la Corte, but in the articles they used pictures of two different men. The story was clearly reprinted multiple times in the hopes that readers wouldn't remember the previous ones. It's kind of like how I post the same TikTok video multiple times a week, just tweaking little details here and there, because their algorithm tends to show every video to a mostly different audience anyway. And the Weekly World News isn't exactly known for its accurate or serious reporting. Some of my sources refer to it as a tabloid and others as satirical. Here are just a few of the article headlines I came across while I was researching for this video. Hubby keeps dead wife in glass coffee table. Baby born with tattoo, dated 1917. This was supposed to be proof of reincarnation. Demons burn my hubby to a crisp. Godzilla trapped in Massachusetts blizzard. Garden of Eden found. And my personal favorite, half human, half fish found in Florida. This one had to be spliced together from two different scanned-in pages, which is why it looks even more kooky than it normally would. And the paper's website suggests they at least heavily lean into the satire. As stated on their About page, Weekly World News has the most educated, loyal, and dedicated readership in the history of news. Throughout history, the smartest people on Earth have been loyal readers. In fact, many people have told us that Albert Einstein often reads Weekly World News while riding his bicycle. Others tell us they have Albert Einstein's brain in their attic, which jiggles every time it hears a Weekly World News story. In addition to this, the photo they used in all three articles of the plane appears to be a stock photo available to anyone using it for editorial purposes for about $40. Over time, people retelling the story on paranormal blogs and websites have added more details to it. I also added a few details in my retelling here. Clearly, the story has continued to grow outside the paper. But where did they get the story? There is a very similar episode of The Twilight Zone called Odyssey of Flight 33. In this episode, the plane went too fast and somehow ended up time warping back to the time of the dinosaurs, then forward again. It was kind of nuts. There's also the real-life tragedy of Northwest Airlines Flight 2501. This plane disappeared over Lake Michigan in 1950. The wreckage has never been found. It's not clear exactly where the idea of Flight 914 came from, but did someone at the Weekly World News hear about one or both of these things and get an idea? So it's hard to say what inspired the story, but that leads me to my next question. Why has it stuck around? Why are people so interested in it? For one, people have a fascination with planes and flying. A lot of people just think airplanes are cool, but for some of us, the interest is a little more morbid. You probably have a fear of flying yourself, or at least have a loved one who does. Even though all statistics show plane travel is a lot safer than car travel, I find it even scarier. This is partially because most people don't fly on a regular basis, so it's not something they're used to, but I think it also has to do with distance. If you get in a car crash, you're just a few feet from the ground, so you don't have as far to fall, and there's a higher chance you'll land safely. But if a plane malfunctions tens of thousands of feet up in the air, well, there's nowhere to go but down. There's one other similar story that I wanted to mention here but couldn't really fit it in anywhere else. A few years after the first Flight 914 story, the Weekly World News published another similar article. This time, a plane went missing from Germany in 1954 with 92 people on board. It landed in Brazil in 1989 with 92 skeletons on board. I just wanted to mention that really quickly because it's similar and taps into similar fears. Plus, I think it's just so much creepier. The story also taps into our fascination with time travel. Granted, I've never been that interested in time travel myself, but clearly there are a lot of people who are. And we've probably all wondered what would happen if we could go back in time and change something in our past. Maybe we could fix something we regretted doing, or even go forward and see what our lives would be like. Would we get our dream job, get married, and have children? Or would our lives completely fall apart? One last thing I want to mention is misinformation. I was 10 years old in 1999 when the Blair Witch Project came out, and I remember my friends and classmates having discussions about whether it was a true story. Flight 914 cropped up in the 1980s, at a time when most people didn't have easy access to the internet. It was hard to verify a lot of this information, leading to some people believing it was true. I talked more about this in my video on Himura Mansion, which you can watch up here or find a link in the description. It might be tempting to look back on this time and make fun of people who believe these things, but even today, so-called fake news can spread like wildfire. I can't tell you how many times I've gone onto Reddit or in the YouTube comments section and seen someone say something I know is not true because I've looked into the topic. But they say it like it's objective fact, and they're pretty confident about it. When they get called out, either by me or someone else, their response is always some variation of, "Oh, well, I thought it was true." And as annoying as this is, I can't get too mad at them for it because I'm guilty of it too. We all have some sort of confirmation bias, especially in things like politics and religion. Left, right, center, Christian, Muslim, atheist, whatever your affiliation, I think we've all had times where we wanted a story to be true because it fit our preconceived notion of the world. And there's part of us that wants to believe stories like this are true because they're so interesting. When I make these videos covering alleged paranormal things, I end up debunking a lot of them. Even on the videos where I think I've thoroughly debunked something and the paranormal is clearly not involved in that case, I still get comments from people saying that they think it's true. People are curious by nature, and we're always going to be drawn to things we can't explain. As stated by the Connect Paranormal blog, even those who accept the narrative as fiction sometimes show a wish for it to be genuine, implying that such urban legends satisfy a psychological need for mystery and wonder in an increasingly explained environment. So, was there a real airplane that took 37 years to land? No, but I think the story being fiction makes it even more interesting. Just like a lot of the urban legends I talked about recently, it tells us something about our subconscious and nature, both what we want and what we fear. Thanks for watching, and have a creepy day.